How's everybody doing tonight? Wow. We're in a great mood today. Let's hang out, talk Jazz Nets. And crack open our beer here. Woo! That was a lot of fun today. Hope y'all are joining your Friday night. Pouring this beer out to enjoy with y'all. You can join our Twitter Spaces. You can join the YouTube link here. You can join the Discord that I don't have, that I'm just going to say because that's what streamers say. We're just having some fun here. What a great game. To just the attitude that we were able to have today and actually enjoy a basketball game for the first time in a long time was so refreshing. We'll talk about the details soon. I'm just happy. I'm having a beer. I'm going to talk to the Jazz and the NBA soon. I'm trying to think if there's any social channel I've not shared this out at. Hopefully, we got some folks in the Twitter Spaces joining us to talk about the Jazz. I'm also on YouTube. You can see my ugly ass face drinking the beer, which I have drank several of today. So, 23-point victory for the Jazz tonight. They were up by 40 at some point, 39. This game was not close for the entirety of the game. I will say after the first quarter, the Jazz dominated the Nets in the first quarter, and they were only up by like 6 or 8 or something. It was actually kind of disappointing because the Jazz had their connectivity back. Let's talk about who did and didn't play because that seems to be a thing in February basketball. Not only the coronavirus protocols of December that really fucked everything up, but January has also had a lot of injuries for a lot of teams. So I think it's important to know who did and didn't play. So I recognize we're also in February. I hate winter. It's all just one big month for me. But the Nets had they had Kyrie Irving. It's a road game, right? His unvaccinated ass is playing in Salt Lake City, not playing at home, but he is playing on road games, so he did play today. But he was the only All-Star level player playing for the Nets today. So we had Kevin Durant's been out for a while. He'll be back probably closer to late March, early April. James Harden was a surprise scratch today. He had a sore something other. I guess there was an old Reddit post that's been well circulated that James Harden plays poorly or does not play in the games following cities that have poor strip club accommodations. In Salt Lake City, I don't think you would call a city with a good example of quality on that respect. But he was injured. He didn't play. I just like the joke because it's a funny joke. But there are stats behind it. I will be clear about that. So no Durant, no Harden. That's kind of the whole point. But I kind of went into this game noting that like the Nets have some young players that, unlike the Jazz deep bench, where you're kind of have just hoping that somebody kind of sticks and plays a little bit and has a good can show something. The Nets have real talent on their deep bench that just is very unproven. Day'Ron Sharpe is a 6'9", 6'10" center who has really come on as of late. And Nick Claxton, which we all know a little bit better, he started, but he went down early with a hamstring injury. He's a center, high-flying center, and I was a little bit nervous going into today. We'll talk about the Jazz injuries shortly, but no Rudy Gobert, and so you have Nick Claxton, a real high-energy, quality guy who's used to playing with talent. He was unable to play after about 5 minutes. And then you get Kessler Edwards, who has also come on of late, small forward, kind of a 3-and-D type. He's been pretty good. And because of the injuries to Claxton and all the others, we ended up with Cam Thomas, out of LSU. He was a late first-round pick of the Desmond Bain, Udoka Azubuike, kind of like that level of the draft, right? But he is a scorer, right? Capital S scorer. and he was the guy that really played off of Irving most of the game. I think he had the most minutes for the Nets today, 31 minutes. The Nets have that whole long bullshit about stats is to say the Nets have some guys that can come in and kind of contribute. Bruce Brown only played 20 minutes. He was a hero in the playoffs last year, if you may recall. He still only plays 20 minutes. I think that's awfully surprising. We'll get into that. Patty Mills, I'm looking off screen because I'm taking a look at my stats. Patty Mills, I mean, he's been a hero for the Nets this year. He's exactly what they hoped he would be. He is Australian Patty Mills. He lights it on fire whenever he's on the court. Not a great defender, but he gives a shit. Only 23 minutes today. Again, it was a blowout, but 3-7 from 3. It was kind of what you'd expect. And Kyrie Irving just he showed up. Like, he was able to do his moves and be physical and get open for shots, and he was just missing everything. Nets, by the way, I should finish Irving's stat line. 15 points in 31 minutes, 6 of 20 from the field. Jazz did it. Even the deep bench Jazz defenders did a great job forcing him off the 3-point line and forcing him into that Chris Paul role of shooting mid-rangers. Thing is, Kyrie Irving's mid-ranger is not as automatic as Devin Booker and Chris Paul, right? So he got to his mid-range, contested him okay, but he had some wide-open mid-rangers that bounced out because it's just he's not Kevin Durant or Chris Paul in that respect. He's a crafty guy who gets to the rim where he shoots threes. His mid-range game is, obviously, he's an all-star. He's good at the mid-range, but that's not his total game. Jazz, they had a guy active today who hasn't played in the past several games. His name is Donovan Mitchell. I think you've heard of him. Donovan Mitchell's fucking awesome. Dude played 22 minutes today, scored 27 points. I find the discussions around Donovan versus Rudy, like who is the best player on the Jazz, those arguments are so dumb because they are equally the lifeblood of what makes the Utah Jazz a top 2, 3, 4 team in the NBA. They might alternate who has a good game, who has a bad game. The way I like to think of it is instead of like who's better, you may take away from my opinion here is to think something different, but Rudy Gobert establishes the highest floor of any player in the NBA. If you have Rudy Gobert on your team, he and a bunch of G League scrubs, he is the biggest floor raiser, I think, in the NBA. Because you get a bunch of G League guys, they know how to play basketball, and a lot of G League guys are great shooters. The Salt Lake City Stars have a great one in Carson Edwards, who just lights it up from 3, right? He can't defend worth a lick, and he's tiny, so that's why he's in the G League. But Rudy Gobert is, you put him on any team in the NBA, your floor as a defense is 10th, 9th, 8th. And if you have 8th best defense, you're a problem for every team in the NBA. If you're a problem for every team in the NBA, you're going to win 30 games. Donovan Mitchell is Utah's ceiling raiser. Donovan Mitchell is what establishes your ceiling to the Pantheon, to win a title. Both are important. And I would say equally. So we get Donovan today, and we don't have Rudy, still nursing a calf. I really hope he takes his time on that. They say he's going to come back early next week. I almost hope he doesn't because the calf injuries have a propensity to be re-injured, and I want him to be in like the world's longest cryogenic chamber because it doesn't matter what he produces in March. It matters what he produces in April, May, and June. But if he's ready to play, he's ready to play, but he's not back yet. So the Jazz are putting out Udoka Azubuike and Hassan Whiteside at center, and Donovan Mitchell he's the kind of guy where he's going to do everything he can to make sure that when he steps on a basketball court, and he's also young enough to do this, that he's ready to contribute right away. And from the moment the ball was tipped, that guy was ready to play. Donovan, when he's not feeling himself, when we saw it in the playoffs, is still a great player, all-star level player. If he has the juice, and we've all seen it dozens and dozens of times before. We've seen very good Donovan Mitchell, but when we see fuck you Donovan Mitchell, a guy who takes over a game with ease, his eyes go black, he sees the whole floor, he's able to pass it so easily, and his three-point shot ends up being so pure on step backs, on catch and shoots. He nailed it. And that 27-6 I have on the screen, that's 6 assists. And he had a few brilliant passes to folks who also missed. Like he kicked it out on this no-look wraparound pass to Trent Forrest in the corner. If that is literally any other player, that's a made three. I have to slide in a shitting on Trent Forrest every so often, if you don't mind. Awesome game. Taking a drink here. So he took over. I mean, he was the best player on the floor. And when you get games like that, it was just so easy and so fun to watch. Not much else to say about Donovan's game other than he was just seeing everything and scoring everything just with ease and with confidence, and he was physically ready. So that was just wonderful to see today. As far as other Jazz guys out, Jordan Clarkson didn't play today. Obviously, I mentioned Rudy's out. Quinn Snyder's still out, so Alex Jensen was coaching. Next guy I want to talk about is Jared Butler. 5 points today, 2 of 8 shooting, and you'd think like, this guy's not ready to play. I wholeheartedly disagree. I thought today was one of his best games he's played as a pro. He missed some shots, but 6 assists, 0 turnovers, minimal fuck-ups defensively. If he makes 2 of 4 from 3 instead of 1 of 4, he had a couple bunnies miss as layups. He missed his only free throw. This could very easily have been a 10-point, 6-assist night for Jared Butler. And he had verve. He had the verve that we all watched in highlights at Baylor. That verve of being that backup point guard, bench scorer type that we really cared about. We finally saw it today. I think for the first time since preseason. He's had moments. He's had shots. Like he's had a couple moments here and there, but it wasn't until today that I thought that he really showed out and had a very confident performance, and also stayed in front of his man defensively. Knew where he had to be defensively. He was on the floor often with Hassan Whiteside, which helped. Really impressed with Jared Butler. And Mike Conley, 23 minutes. You know what you're going to get out of Mike Conley's 23 minutes, right? He's usually going to be a 28, 29, 30-minute player. But his 23 minutes were mature, and the team was run efficiently. He's been a little slump from 3. He was only 2 of 5 today, but that's still 40%. And in those 2 threes were backbreaker, just confident Mike Conley shots we've been used to seeing over the past year and a half. And then the interesting piece, I think, today was what Alex Jensen, proxy for Quinn Snyder today, decided to do with the centers. Hassan Whiteside was active today. However, he did not start the game that we've been used to seeing. And Hassan Whiteside starting games without Rudy Gobert has been... I need a drink for this one. I think. It's been a little bit of an adventure. I'm not sure Hassan Whiteside gives a shit all the time. And especially when he starts. I mean, he hasn't been a full-time starter since Miami, which was a few years ago, and certainly needs to have a little bit more energy and reason to play. He did not start today in favor of Udoka Azubuike, and I think the coach speak excuse is going to be, well, Hassan, your role is to be the bench center. We need you to play with other guys who will be in that kind of rotation so you can develop a rapport with those players. You starting does not help this team win a title. That's going to be the coach speak. However, I think there's some credence to that coach speak. I think that's probably right. But I do think when you compare Hassan's weaknesses with the few strengths that Udoka Azubuike has, which is energy and effort, but in short spurts, it makes sense to start Azubuike at center, give you that 4 minutes of biggest, most athletic guy on the court, and give him that short spurt and bring in Hassan Whiteside against the bench units where he's an older guy, a little bit slower, who can dominate in his own way against bench units. I think it made sense to start Azubuike against... at the time, they had started Nick Claxton, who's an energetic, high-flying center. And Azubuike doesn't have like the highest jump in the world, but he's huge and he can jump a little bit. I think it made sense for him to go against Claxton than Hassan Whiteside. And as we went through the game, that proved correct. Hassan Whiteside came in, and he was able to impose his will against smaller, shittier players for the Nets. Whereas Azubuike, he was able to provide exactly what I was presupposing, which was that energy and effort from the jump, being the biggest guy in the court, being the best shot blocker on the court. He was full of energy, and I loved it. He only has his gas tank is just so limited. And so we were able to play Azubuike 24 minutes tonight. He had his first double-double of his career. He was credited with 0 blocks, but I could have sworn he had 1. He was fantastic, I think, at Azubuike levels. And Whiteside, I thought, did what he was supposed to do. Whiteside was only a 0 on the plus-minus front, but I was happy with Whiteside in a bench role as opposed to a starter. And I think if he was a starter, you would have seen some problems. So we're here. Jazz live postgame. Hanging out, watching the Jazz, enjoying it. Where are y'all at today? Hopefully you're enjoying the NBA. We got Philly and Dallas first quarter. Probably tune into that. Not a ton to take away from today. There's some trade talk out there, but not the most fun thing to talk about with just a couple people hanging out. Jazz get the win by 20 plus minutes. It was a lot of fun today. Just a lot of energy, a lot of dunks. It was just delightful. We had a lot of fun today. Having a beer. I love this. This is having on the screen. It's a vanilla coffee cream ale. I don't like bitterness in my drinks. I don't like IPAs, and I can appreciate a good IPA. I appreciate what IPAs do, but I don't like bitterness with beer, I think. And you'll see a lot of stouts and porters. They say, "Oh, you gotta add the coffee to it." You get that coffee aura, that coffee smell. You certainly get the coffee taste, but that coffee aftertaste, I just don't think is enjoyable with the hops that you'll get from a beer. But a cream ale is light. It's bright. It's refreshing. It's meant to be this... its name is kind of a misnomer because you're not drinking a cream ale expecting to get like a lactose beer or something like that. Like you're not getting a milkshake IPA out of a cream ale. It's just the name they give to the method of brewing. And cream ales are crisp. They're bright. And the coffee and vanilla on this cream ale makes it so the bitterness dies with the brightness. And so you get just like this bright, flavorful beer, and it's really quite wonderful. So we're having a good time. It's a quiet night tonight here in Jazz postgame land. I wonder if you all tuned it off in the third quarter. I'm going to get some more folks hanging out with us. I'll retweet out the link here. See if folks will join us. Have a beer with us. Rolf, I see you. You're the man. Go Jazz. So we got Jazz fans against racism. Thanks for joining, man. We're all chatting the Jazz. I just gave a summary of the game, which we all saw. Having a beer. What a fun game. We're enjoying these games tonight. What a great game for the Jazz, and especially as a fan, you can really enjoy a good 20-point win. It was a 40 points at one point. JFAR, if you're requesting, we're gonna hear you. So what do you got to say, my man? I'll turn you on. You removed your request. That's all right.
I wish it didn't default to mute when you let somebody in. That's my request feature.
Yeah, it requires a couple taps to get you online. We got a quiet night today. I'm on video, but you're not. So you're free to talk without anyone having to see you. It's quiet today. Usually we get a lot more people hanging out after Jazz wins, especially. What's on your mind tonight?
This was the best win in weeks. Obviously, I didn't get to watch much of the game. I've been taking a small mental health break from the team to so many losses in a row just starts to be a drag. So, but I did watch a little bit of the game, and the little bit that I watched was extremely exciting. I saw Donovan jumping out of the gym, basically. Was really impressed with his energy level, especially after missing so much time, and he just looked fired up. He was going after rebounds that weren't even really possible. He's just all over the place. I just saw, basically I watched the second quarter, so I don't know if that held up throughout the game, but I was really impressed with what he brought in the second quarter anyway.
No, I think mentioning the second quarter is exactly the Donovan Mitchell that we saw for the whole game. I described it earlier as, do you mind if I call you Blair?
Yeah, that's great.
All right, yeah. Donovan's second quarter was really epitome of what the ceiling of Donovan Mitchell is. There's a Donovan Mitchell floor that we all see from time to time, which is a 25-point scorer. He'll get a couple of rebounds. He'll get a couple of assists. But when you see Donovan Mitchell's eyes kind of go black, and he does three things that I think when you know that Donovan Mitchell's really into a basketball game, and you really saw it today because he was itching to just play basketball again, you see three things I noticed. One, he's passing all over the gym. He is making those behind-the-back passes. He's doing the no-look passes to the corner. It's not that he doesn't have those layups available. And I think it's inappropriate to say, oh, Donovan has hero ball sometimes. I actually think when Donovan is just feeling it, he just sees the court better and is able to pass. So that's one of three. The second thing was what you mentioned, which is the rebounding. When Donovan is feeling it, he puts his legs into those rebounds and he says, I'm going to help. He's not a great box-out guy. In even when he's trying, the best rebounders can fool him and get around him. But Donovan's at his best as a rebounder when he decides to just go up. He doesn't really box out when he's at his best. He just goes up and helps out Rudy or helps out Doak or helps out Hassan by just, he sees the center boxing out the opposing team's best center and says, you know what, you're doing your job as a 7-footer, the best in the game. I'm going to go up and I'm going to get this rebound and I'm going to jump and hit the square in the backboard. When he's doing that, you can tell he's feeling it. And on a related point, Donovan still isn't the greatest defender. And when you see him trying, though, you see him thinking harder about going over and under screens. And most importantly, if something fucks up on the offensive end and he needs to contest a shot, you see on all three of these facets happen in the same game. When Donovan is feeling it, he contributes defensively by contesting those shots at the rim, and sometimes those players still score layups over him. He's still a 6'1" dude he's got a huge wingspan, but he's still 6'1". But when he's still trying on those contests, it's a different player. And I think you saw that today. I certainly think you saw that in the second quarter today. Is that kind of the vibe you were getting?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The energy level, he was just on a whole new level, and I don't expect any player to be able to do that every night. I don't even know that it would be a healthy idea to do that every night. I think there's some wisdom in picking your spots and letting the game come to you. But we're seeing more of that energy and that joy that we've seen in previous seasons from Donovan. I saw that tonight in a way that I don't feel like I've seen for a while. And it was just noticeable. I can still see it right now. Him jumping out of the gym, basically. So yeah, that's the feeling I got. You can tell when he's fully locked in. He's always a good player, but in games like this, you can just tell he wants to be there. Reminded me a little bit of the 50-pointer he put up against Denver. I mean, obviously he wasn't scoring at that level, but he's just locked in. He can elevate. He can take it to a next level. We didn't really get to see that in the playoffs last year because of his injury, and I think that perhaps some Jazz fans have kind of forgotten a little bit about it because recency bias is such that we forget. But he's got this extra level. It's an all-star level. It puts him with some of the best in the league, and I love watching it. It made me just realize how much I miss watching him just play ball.
You nailed it. The only quibble I'll take is that his floor is an all-star level, right? It's that when he has the extra juice, he is a second, third team all-NBA guard, and it is wow. I said earlier before, just a little bit before, is that I think Rudy is the best ceiling, Rudy Gobert is the best floor in the league. And Donovan Mitchell, though, ascends the Jazz into title contention if he has that juice that he has today. It's a different Donovan when you see that. The 50-point game against Denver, I think, is a great example of one of my most frustrating moments as a Jazz fan, because a lot of times people watch a Damian Lillard or that type score the 50-burger and you're all excited and it's a great offensive performance. Donovan, when he has the offensive game going and he's seeing the passes as well as the scoring, he also is a young gun. He's got the energy and the verve and came out the draft as a defensive stopper. I think after watching the duel with him and Jamal Murray, I was so frustrated that as we were watching Joe Ingles get calcified in real time, who, as Dan Clayton has pointed out this year, is still a good defender in pick-and-roll situations in the regular season, but I don't think Joe Ingles, and I don't think anyone, including Dan Clayton, would agree that Joe Ingles should guard small guards anymore. We were watching Jamal Murray torch Joe Ingles in real time, just simple screens off of Jokic, and Joe Ingles would try to go over a Jokic screen to contest a Jamal Murray shot. Jamal Murray was already 7 feet away at that point. I think Donovan Mitchell should have been to on, off, offense, defense. We might have ended up seeing an all-time playoff performance instead of an all-time Jazz offensive playoff performance. I'm glad you mentioned that, because that's kind of what I'm getting at, is when Donovan's on and he's healthy, he is an all NBA player. And it is so amazing to watch. And I think if he continues that after this concussion, if, he doesn't have to be tonight every night, 27 points in 22 minutes. He doesn't have to do that every night. But I do think that if he continues this sort of trajectory, he's going to make third team All-NBA, which would be the Jazz haven't had two All-NBA players on the same team since Stockton Malone. And I would like a title as much as the next guy. But I do think that Stockton Malone had some pretty good success with the Jazz. Mental health break from the Jazz. I support that. So I'm a big sports fan in general. I grew up in a small town. My family was not really that into sports. My brother was kind of a Jets fan, but not really until older. So I was this weird kid in Western New York, in a rural area, who just was, I love sports. I love NASCAR, football, basketball, that whole thing. And until college, sports kind of defined my emotions. And when I was in college, the 49ers, my favorite football team, they were fucking terrible. But I still let their losses define my mood the next day. And it wasn't until I went to, after college, going to law school and just being an adult, that you'd have a bad 49er season and be like, I don't have to do this. I don't. This enjoyment is meant to be enjoyable. And I do think there is virtue. There's a fine line, right? There is virtue to enjoying, for lack of a better phrase, the down years, seeing the progression, seeing the development. But if it's just frustrating you, if you're going into a Jazz game knowing that all the best players aren't going to play and the team's probably going to lose, or maybe your favorite player just isn't going to play. Maybe your favorite player is Joe Ingles and you're kind of despondent about the season. You don't have to do any of this. And I promise you, you will enjoy the NBA Finals when the Jazz win the title as much as anybody else. How much of that sort of mindset kind of goes into your thoughts, Blair, if you want to mention about it?
Yeah, I've tweeted about fan depression. I think it's a real thing, and we really identify with the team that we love. And sometimes for me, we like to bask in the reflected glory of our sports teams. We wear the jerseys, we wear the clothes, we watch the games. It really becomes kind of an important part. It's like an escape, but we also want our escapes to be uplifting and happy and relaxing. And when the team's in such a slump and having as many health issues as we've had, and this is probably the losingest portion of a season we've had in quite some time, and it just starts to weigh down. And so to me, it's I just kind of say, is this a net negative right now on my overall mood? Is it affecting my mood? Is it affecting how I relate to my family? Is it is it a distraction from other important things? And so, I think sometimes I'll just break away for a little bit and recharge and come back. And I have little routines that I do, on game day I wear Jazz socks, and I have little things like that. I have a belt, a Jazz belt buckle that I'll wear on game days. So if things aren't going well,
I'll be honest, that's pretty sweet. I've seen a lot of Jazz paraphernalia over the years. I don't think I've seen a Jazz belt buckle.
Yeah, it's from Mission, the Mission belt guys. They have, every sports, they have every NBA team that's, licensed. It's one of those sweet Mission belts. It's not a Grip 6 belt that David Locke would pitch. But anyways, yeah, that's what I do. But, after a while, I'll say, all right, I'm not putting the socks on today. I just don't want to, look down and see these socks for a team that's just having a hard time. I just don't want it on. I don't want to bask in the difficult parts all the time. I don't consider that to be fair weather fanning. I'm still a fan of the team, and I've watched plenty of losses. And but I think if you notice it combining with other things, if you notice yourself getting depressed or letting it affect your mood unreasonably, then step away for a little while. And the other thing I'll do is like make little promises or bets. So, all right, if the Jazz lose like three in a row, then I'm going to get that shirt that I've been looking at, I'm going to go grab a McFlurry if they lose tonight, or, stuff like that. So you can kind of like bet, place a bet kind of against the Jazz, I guess, so that you can offset their loss with like your own little personal win. I'm sure some people would have a problem with that, but these are just like little things I've tried to. It really used to affect my mood a lot. I would. Oh yeah, it came to the point where it's like, look, you can either find ways to cope properly with this, or you just need to quit watching Jazz games. So I went with the former option.
And do you have 5-10 minutes to keep going on discussion with me about this, or are you hanging up?
Yeah, I have a few minutes.
No, because this is one of my favorite topics to talk about in general, about like how to be a passionate and healthy sports fan. I think it's a very underrated aspect about modern sports fandom. A little background. I mean, I'm gonna spill a little bit on our live postcast, and that's like when I went to college, I was still a very competitive person. If I'm being honest, I hadn't faced many competitive obstacles in my life. Not socioeconomic, but like when it came to like music or sports or anything, I was pretty like, whenever it came to that sort of stuff, I was fine. And then like I met my new like college dorm mates and that sort of thing, and I saw a guy whip a controller across the room when he lost a video game. And I thought to myself, like, is that actually me? Like, this was like in the first week of college, freshman year of college. I always thought to myself, like, is that actually something about me that I need to be cognizant of? And it was like night and day. It was like a switch flip for me about competitiveness and maturity. Like in that very moment, and I was like, I'm gonna have a tough time making friends with my colleagues here in this new environment. And I went to a large state school. You see the University of Buffalo flag behind me. 40,000 person school from people from all different walks of life. And if I am this competitive jerk, like I'm going to have a kind of a tough time. But it wasn't until several years later that I mentioned this earlier that like my mood still was dependent on sports winning and my favorite teams being successful, even though I was going through the Niners doing terrible and the Jazz were in the Ty Corbin years. So what exactly was I looking forward to? That's a great question. I don't fucking know. I was just always like kind of sad after a Niners game, right? Or, you get the Jazz and you had some like prospects that were okay, but as excited as we were about Gordon Hayward or Alec Burks, no one ever looked at those guys as being like, oh, the way we did when Donovan had his rookie year, right? We're like, well, we might be able to cobble together a 6-seed team in the NBA. No, like, we never had a Donovan moment until we had a Donovan moment. This was at the tail end of the Darren Williams, Carlos Boozer years, right? So this was a little bit of a dark time. And I think you've nailed it when you talk about it's okay to say this team is not giving me enjoyment right now. I am watching this team lose. I'm not having fun. It's in some respects when the Sixers had Ben Simmons last year, they were winning games, but in very frustrating ways, or they would lose games in really catastrophic fashion. I mean, the team, the Cleveland Cavaliers fan watching newly acquired Jared Allen and watching Colin Sexton before he got hurt and Darius Garland kind of butt into his own, they were kind of going to every game saying like, we might have a chance today and this is kind of fun. Let's see what's going on. And sometimes watching a good team can provide you that same pain as watching just like a team with no direction. And it's okay to say, I have better things to do with my time. After the Jazz lost to the Clippers, the 27-point loss. I'm not saying everyone should get a dog, but I have 2 Cavalier King Charles Spaniels, and if you know anything about the breed, they are like the love bug breed. And so I watch every Jazz game with my youngest dog on my lap, which helps during the game, and beer helps as well. But after the game, it's really great to just take a walk with the dogs. We don't need dogs to take a walk. And just taking a 90-minute walk, no podcast, no audio, no music, just, it was middle of summer here in Denver, just taking a walk, looking at stuff. All of a sudden your mind starts to drift. You just stop thinking about the 27-point loss. These things are healthy. And it's okay to be a diehard fan of a team that has a chance of winning a title. You're going to have a lot of fun. Not watching a game that you think is going to piss you off is totally healthy, I think. I know you're going to agree with this, everything I just said. And I'm wondering about how you handled last postseason, or if you were a fan during the Ty Corbin years, how did you handle that sort of stuff?
No, I've been a fan since I was in 3rd grade, so I was, this is back in the days of Bobby Hansen, and Stockton was just starting to come into his own. But so you mentioned a few things that are really important. When we are dealing with disappointment from losses like that, I'm the type of person that can really get stuck on ruminating, which is like kind of obsessive thinking, like just thinking about like, oh my gosh, like when we lost that last Clippers game, like thinking about how we blew that lead and how'd that happen and how did this guy go off on us, and my brain will just want to like keep thinking about it obsessively. And moving, psychologists and therapists have shown that moving our bodies is actually a really great way to move ourselves out of that spiral. So going for a run or a walk, or even just like walking around your apartment or your house, walking up and down some stairs, moving your body will produce endorphins that kind of kick against the cortisol that your body's producing when you're stressed out and angry or depressed or whatever. So moving your body is one way I do that as well. Going for a walk. Another way that I do it is there's this great technique that I learned from mindfulness and meditation. It's called noting, like putting a note on something. So it's observing the thoughts that you're having and identifying what they are and just like putting a little note on them. So I'll be ruminating about the game and be like, wow, I'm really upset that we lost. That I feel angry about that. That's anger. Or I feel sad about that. I wanted better things. Or wow, I really keep thinking about that missed free throw a lot. That's a thing I keep thinking about. If you can start using that mindfulness technique to like acknowledge the stuff that you're feeling, it can help you get off of it can help me anyway. It helps me get off of the merry-go-round of just like going around and around and around. Talking to other people can be helpful. I mentioned like a consolation prize idea. Like, all right, if we lose this, I'm going to go do X, Y, Z, or I'll do this or that. It's nice to have like a book that you can turn to like after a game. Like, oh, I've been reading this book that I really enjoy. I'm just going to crack that open and read. Or maybe a movie that you've been wanting to see. So there are different ways, like move your body, distract your mind, take your mind off of it, use mindfulness practices. These are kind of things that I've found to be helpful, and I don't think that I'm obsessed enough as a fan that I don't think I'd be able to continue being a fan if I hadn't developed these kind of things. And I don't always get it right. Like sometimes I'll sit there and doom scroll after a game for like refreshing my Twitter feed for like an hour, just like looking at all the stuff people are saying, just feeling like really crappy about it. That's just not really healthy to do. If I see myself falling into that.
Yeah, I actually want to just cut you off there just because the whole
I was about done.
No, well, the whole reason I've started these postcasts and why I put myself on video having beers, right? I have a mostly healthy relationship with alcohol. right? I like good beer. I don't binge drink. I just like to drink good stuff frequently. uh, but it's the reason I started this is that doom scrolling aspect where we finished that 27-point loss, and I mentioned going on that long dog walk after that loss. Uh, it wasn't until then, like beforehand, the Jazz have had crippling losses before. They had that loss against the Grizzlies in the first round this past year. And I was on my phone, doom scrolling. And I know that Jazz content gets consumed in greater numbers after wins than losses. However, I wanted to come up with the space that people can just come and just be like, I want to talk about the Jazz. My wife's in bed, my kids are in bed, or I'm alone, I'm in my apartment, or whatever, and just have a place that would be like, there's a real person on screen to talk to about the Jazz, right? I wanted to be like a little bit healthier spot than just sitting alone with a dog, admittedly, but let's just like sitting alone, having a beer, maybe having too many beers, and watching the Jazz after a frustrating performance. So I'm hoping that this is this isn't like a celebration thing. Like I would love it when we won the NBA Finals. We got 90,000 people in here. We're all having fun. But I mainly wanted it to be a place that we can enjoy together and each other. The one piece that I didn't hear you mention is how you've dealt with missing games and saying like I'm not going to watch today. How is it that you think that you've handled being like, you know what, part of it, I guess, is FOMO, I guess is a way to put it, but also a commitment to say, you know what, until the Jazz get healthy, I don't need to be a part of this. And obviously the Jazz being unhealthy and injured it makes it a little bit easier. But is there any part of you that... Go ahead.
Yeah, there is. I mean, yeah, so here's how that works. I have my family, my wife, 2 kids. My kids are in first grade and third grade. They're barely starting to become kind of Jazz fans. My wife's never really been a Jazz fan. She doesn't dislike the Jazz, but it's not really her thing. She'll go to a game with me here and there, but it's not really her thing. And so I don't get.
So we're the same person.
Yeah, and I don't. So that actually means that I don't watch a ton of games live. In fact, I watch more games live once I started Anti-Racist Jazz because I found that like engagement was a lot higher during games, and so it was a way to interact with people and kind of grow the reach of what I'm doing for the sake of the project. But even then, I try not to. I feel like I'm taking time away from my family if I'm watching every single game. So it's pretty easy then to say, hey, or to feel terrible about, wow, you know what? I could have played with my kids tonight or done something like that, and instead I just watched us get our butts kicked by the frickin' Detroit Pistons. Which, I feel doubly resentful about then because I could have done something more useful and fun, and also the Jazz also lost on top of that. So, so it's actually pretty easy then to say, okay, like tonight we played Uno. I played Uno with my kids and my wife, and I checked the score at some point, and I was like, oh, cool, like they're kicking their butts. It's awesome. So the other thing is I have that Fubo or whatever this cable streaming option is, and so I can record the games, and if it's a great game, an amazing game, then I'll watch the replay. And so I do have that backup because I do still want to see. I don't mind seeing a replay of the game. If it's a fun game, then I'll watch a replay of it. So that's kind of how it shakes out for me. Is like I already have some family responsibilities that, like my buddy, he had a ticket tonight. He said, "Hey, come to the game with me for free." And I was like, I've been out of town for a little while. Just got back. Want to spend some time with my family, but and so that's pretty rare. That's for me. That's a big thing. But I think it. I'm just in a place right now where it felt like the right thing to do. So, yeah, that's how it works for me. Like and I recorded the game, so I'll probably go back and watch some of it. And I don't know. I also feel like it's freaking February, and this is something I wouldn't do during the playoffs. Like, I'm going down with the ship in the playoffs. Like, I'm gonna watch every second and watch us like either excel or watch us get blown to smithereens. So I'm a diehard during playoff time anyway. But I do watch most games, if not live, then replay. I'm not gonna go back and watch the last 12 out of the last 14 games we lost or whatever it is. Yeah, I'm not. I don't need to watch those ones.
Yeah, I think that's an important point, that you can literally do anything else, right? You don't have to have a family Uno night to enjoy whatever it is about your life that is just more enjoyable than watching a Jazz lose by 27 points. And I also think you've touched upon a very critical thing that I think a lot of Jazz fans could use is you do not need to watch the February garbage to feel any bit less or more invested when May comes around and we're watching the second round. It's game 6, and like you are going to feel the energy. I mentioned I was a Niners fan before, and football has given me ups and downs with fandoms over the years. But I grew up as a super diehard NFL fan, so it's hard for me to kick. So I'm still a big NFL fan, and the Niners, if anyone's familiar with the NFL, had kind of a weird year where they were shitty for a lot of the year. They were not good. I didn't watch those games, and then they started on a little winning streak, and I didn't see the wins, but I watched the highlights, and I felt a little bad, but not really. And as they were going on their winning streak, they started playing the bad teams, the Texans, the Jaguars, teams they absolutely were gonna beat pretty easily. I didn't watch those games either. I said, the Niners are going to beat these teams. It's fine. And come week 16, week 17, the Niners are going to start to, compete for the playoffs. I started watching them, and all of a sudden I was 6 years old again. Just being like really diehard into the team. And I enjoyed those wins. And we had a couple surprising wins in the playoffs. And I enjoyed those. And then they had this real disappointing loss in the NFC Championship game. And I'll admit, I went to bed sad that night. But I woke up the next morning thinking, yeah, fuck it, it's fine. And it's just, I never lost the level of investment, though. Because when they played that cold weather game against the Packers a few weeks ago, oh my goodness, my heart was racing. I was enjoying it. And I swear, if they won the Super Bowl this year, I would have felt all the enjoyment. So I think you've nailed it. Is that you're able to enjoy the Jazz however you want to enjoy it, and if that means that Joe Ingles isn't going to play the rest of the year, and so you don't really want to watch the game because you love Joe Ingles, but you'll tune in for the playoffs, I promise you'll enjoy a championship just as much as everybody else.
I agree. By the way, I do want to add, even though I probably skipped the last probably 8 games or something like that, which that's the longest stretch I've gone in years. But I did happen to see live what happened to Joe, and it's because I was visiting a friend in Washington D.C. and it was his kid's bedtime, so while he was out putting his kids to bed, I'm like, I'll check in on the game. I haven't seen what's going on in a while. So I turned it on, and literally within, I think, 30 seconds, I saw Joe go down, and I mean, what a moment to actually pick to tune in. It was so hard to see, and my heart just goes out to him and his family, the team, and to the Jazz. It hurts the Jazz. It's just the whole thing all around sucks. But I feel like I wasn't already in so much of the mire and depression of where I would be as a Jazz fan, that I think that I was actually able to kind of handle that a little bit better than I would have if I had been watching all those losses and trying to cope with them. Here's my suggestion to every fan: take your temperature. Know what your temperature is. Know and recognize and be okay with either taking a break or finding healthier ways, mentally healthier ways to engage as a fan. Don't let this stuff ruin your days. This is supposed to be fun. it's supposed to be a little bit of escapism. It's supposed to be a time when we can creatively identify with incredible athletes and like feel a little bit by proxy the excitement that they must feel as players. But if it's negatively affecting your life, talk to somebody. Like even therapists, like whatever it takes, just make a mentally healthy decision, and don't feel like you said. If we get to that, if we were to get to the championship game and you end up being able to watch that and enjoy it, you're gonna feel just as good as you did if you'd watched all the games. And yeah, so I'm with you on all that. I am an advocate for mental health and doing what it takes to promote good mental health.
And I think that's a great point to end on with our post game, our postcast that had a great win, but I think has a great message. Then, and thank you for Blair for joining us.
This is the wrong game to have this conversation after, by the way.
No, I mean it's actually the right game to have it, right? Because we got folks who are happy and looking forward to it, and they're thinking like, "Wow, what a really shitty January we just finished." But I think. There's just two messages I want to finish with. The first is, it's also okay to feel sad after Jazz games. No, like Blair and I aren't sitting here saying you can't have a level of investment in a team that leaves you feeling, well, I need to, my mental state is I need to put this aside and be happy. No, it's just more that if you feel like the sadness or negative feelings you have after a bad Jazz performance, even in a win, I've been there, leaves you affecting yourself, affecting your family, affecting anything else in your life that is just aside from being sad about the Jazz. There are other ways to cope, right? And there are other ways to maybe improve how you feel after a loss that does not detract from how you enjoy the wins.
Yeah, really quick, just a footnote to that is like sometimes just acknowledging that you are sad and that that's okay can be helpful in and of itself. Like there's nothing intrinsically wrong with feeling sad about this. Don't add to the sadness or guilt or sorrow by feeling like, well, I shouldn't feel sad about this. Instead, just say to yourself, wow, I feel sad about that. Wow. Yeah, just acknowledge what you feel.
Yeah, that great point. The last point is Jazz won. Donovan kicked a whole lot of ass. And we're really happy about that. This is a good team. I wrote an article about a month and a half ago about enjoy the good moments about the Jazz. The Jazz proceeded to lose a shitload of games. But the point I'm trying to make still remains, which is this team is still really good. Let's enjoy it while we have it. We got a trade deadline coming up soon. I guarantee you we're going to lose at least one, if not two, of players we appreciate. And have meant a lot to the Jazz for the past couple of years, but we're trying to win a title, and the business side is the business side. And hopefully you and I and everyone else will be here to enjoy it. Beers in hand, BYO, and this has been Salt City Hoops live postcast. Had a great time, especially with you, Blair. Thanks for joining us. Very critical voice in the Utah Jazz community. Representing Jazz fans against racism. I should mention that. It's not just Blair, but that is the account, and I'm proud supporter, certainly, about being an anti-racist, and very proud to have Blair join us today on the Twitter Spaces, and you'll hear his audio on the YouTube live postcast as well. We had a great win today. We got a few fun games coming up. I think we'll do this again pretty soon. So that's all we got for tonight, and I hope you all have a good night. Thank you all.